we like it or not. And I think
What do you mean?
Twitch is
It
live.
just starts by itself? So it's like,
Yeah, it's
it
YouTube
just
starts by
it just
itself.
turns on your webcam and it's like whatever is there, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, bye. It's just gonna check on us.
well, that's the way it works. If you set up YouTube and you schedule the stream at a given time, YouTube starts streaming. If your software is connected, that is. If it's not, of course, nothing will happen. So in theory, we are live on both. I think I see the feedback on YouTube, so we are live on YouTube, and I think we are live on Twitch as well.
I see on Twitch it is live. So, yeah.
So we are on. So, well, first of all, I would like to say that everything we say in this call doesn't represent the opinions of our employers, so that we are protected, and any event that we portray is almost entirely fictional. So that's probably the beginning of this call. And then I would like to introduce again Daniele Duri, who's principal animator at. Daniele, do you want to?
Principal animator at CD Projekt Red. Work on Cyberpunk, and that's before CD Projekt Red, I worked at Crytek for many years, so that's my background.
Crytek, there you go. And then we have Francesca Pesce.
Nothing. I feel like you were gonna say something.
No, I'm just saying.
Okay, I am post supervisor and now lighting and comp lead, depending on which project I'm working on at Blue Zoo Animation. I started in Italy in 2010, I think, and I was working for Voyager, which all the time probably know.
I think we have to stop you for a second and
I
go.
don't know what is Voyager. So.
You don't know what Voyager? Voyager is a documentary series, which is an Italian one, of course.
Okay.
And they made heavy use of very high tech CG. So, but now if I Google it in English, I won't find anything. So, oh boy.
There is the parody as well that was pretty famous.
Voyager, but I don't know, guys. You have to give me more to find this thing. Documentary Voyager Italiano. This one. There you go. So they were documentaries that were aired on Italian national TV at the time, and the CG was, when it was there, was done on a budget, of course.
Yes, really small budget.
Really small, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it was a documentary, but it wasn't really rigorous. So there was the parody were coming from the fact that it wasn't the really scientific documentary that you could generally have like with official scientists speaking. Sometimes it will get like a really towards some sort of like, I don't know, paranormal activity or some sort.
So it crossed the line between science and mystique. I don't know how to say
really
that.
Fun. It was really fun. I don't know. I can talk a lot about it, but basically, like it was just really interesting experience because you would just dump like a model from Poser with like three triangles, like, and you make a Tutankhamun, and then you just like do another like really brutal sculpting, and you got the tomb of Tutankhamun, and that was it. So that was where I started. Then I came to London. I did some medical animation.
Wow.
Medical animation is quite
medical
cool.
Animation has to be the nightmare of. I mean, it used to be at least, right?
It was so cool. I
was
really
actually super cool.
In the meantime, I found a Voyager episode named Area 51, which seems to, if this is Voyager indeed, there you go. There's some CG there, very little, but there's something. So this kind of stuff, maybe. So just to give an idea of where Francesca started from, incidentally, it was in Rome, like Daniele and like Max.
So everything happens in Rome in Italy.
Everything happens. Not only all the roads lead to to Rome, but everything happens in Rome. Well, Rome is where the government is, so just like London, it attracts investment, I think, in terms of movie making.
I think now it's maybe towards Milan that it's been moved. I'm not sure because now it looks like a lot of studios, nice studios, are in Milan.
Yeah, in Milan there is Effetti Digitali Italiani. Effetti Digitali Italiani. AD is also called, which is a company that does visual effects in Milan.
I think this is quite old, right? I mean, I remember this from some time ago for sure.
Yeah, well, they've been around for a while for sure, but I think they weren't when we started. I don't recall them being around when we started. So yes, there is stuff going on in Milan, but I'm not really on top of the game as far as Milan is concerned. I don't remember anymore. I don't know anymore who's active there.
I think Studio Bozzetto is like one of the most famous.
Studio Bozzetto, maybe. And we were supposed to have Max today, but it doesn't seem to be connected. So it is our assumption that he didn't manage to connect to the Wi-Fi. Our drones tracked him in this tractor somewhere in the middle of Hungary.
Not bad.
I think, yeah, not bad. I think he's probably hiding somewhere like here, so we can maybe put a cross here. That's where Max would be.
Yeah. So that's for the bomber.
Yeah. And he's held hostage by a spa probably.
He's gonna have a real hard time today. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's going to regret not being here for sure. And so if he manages to join at a certain point, we will hear his voice as well, but I think he won't be joining. And that's about it. Oh, there you go.
You actually called him.
Max, we were speaking of the devil. We just were talking about the fact that you weren't joining probably, and that you were hostage to a spa.
I just crawled out of the sauna like 5 minutes ago.
You're like boiled
my heels.
Okay.
What? Soon we will hear some thumping on a door, like Max, what's going on? Come back. So Max, just to fill you in, we just introduced Daniele and Francesca. And Daniele, of course, we know him already. And a coincidence, you probably don't know, Max, but Francesca worked on the Voyager documentaries. Do you remember the Voyager Italian documentaries, or somewhat documentaries?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely. And incidentally, she started in Rome as well, just like all of us.
Was it back then when we met her? Like I met her for the first time?
Yes, that was the time I was working on Voyager.
Yeah.
So, in fact,
dawn of history.
The dawn of history. Well, she started something like about 10 years after we were in Rome, I think. So a bit later. Yeah, because remember, Max, we visited Rome, me and you. We came back to take a stroll down memory lane.
We definitely did, yes.
And
guys,
Rome
I just jumped in to say hi and to say to say to all my fans that I'm very sorry.
Oh, you're going back to the spa.
No, I'm actually going. Yeah, I got to go out because we are in the middle of nothing, and we have to crawl for 11 kilometers to get a bottle of water, and before they shut down everything. So we have to go on an emergency run. So yeah, I just jumped in. I want to say hi to Sage because she wrote on LinkedIn, so she might be watching. Sage is the amazing animator that worked on the Klackening. We should actually have her as a guest.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, we should definitely get her as a guest. So next time we will organize. Guys, have fun. I will look forward checking the
recording.
Yeah, the recording. And behave, okay?
We will.
Thanks, Francesca. Thanks, Francesca.
Bye.
See you guys. Ciao, ciao.
Bye, Max. So today we wanted to talk about the logistics of working in animation. We wanted to, what we are seeing here is the Klackening, the project Max was referring to. We want to talk really about what happens after you have an interview with a company and they made their financial offer. and what happens to you. In another call, I think we want to go a step further back maybe and discuss what happens during an interview usually and how you get there, which I think is also useful. But today we want to probably talk about something which happens in terms of logistic, because I think it's interesting, especially if you are not, say, a native English speaker, for instance, and you will be a foreigner if you go to, say, the UK or the US, or even if you just need to change country and move somewhere else for a job. So in this respect, since we all started nationally, I had Google Map open because because I was checking when we started, where we started, and so forth. And in my case, for instance, I remember when I started working on that movie that last week we talked about, the worst movie on Netflix. I was living in this area of Italy, and I had to go down to work in Rome. And now it's quite interesting because with a train it takes about 3 hours, but at the time it wasn't really like that. It would take, and plus it was
crappier trains for sure.
Yeah, and plus I mean you could get there I think in 4 to 5 hours, but in practice it would cost you a lot of money. So I always ended up using very very cheap transportation that would take, I don't know, 8 to 9 hours to get there. So it would take a certain amount of time to get there. You go. This is more realistic. About 10 hours to get to Rome. It was about realistic. And then when I was in Rome, I was about to leave the company, and actually I left the company. And after somebody gave me advice, and this somebody would be Raul Cacciamani. Daniele, you remember him? Raul worked with us. There was a company in Germany, Munich, called Scanline Visual Effects, which is still active.
Still there, yeah.
Still there, and it went worldwide now. I think now they have a base in the US, and they were looking for animators. And I remember that Raul approached me and he said, they're looking for animators. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so, and he said, well, you should apply. And I was thinking, they certainly are not looking for me specifically.
Okay, sure.
And Raul said, you should apply. And then and turned out that Raul already had a connection there. He was already hired, and he was essentially recommending me, I think. And that's why he said you should apply, because he knew something I didn't know. And after the interview, I had to figure out how to get to Munich, which I didn't know anything about. I didn't even know how to take a plane. I mean, I had to take a plane for the interview because at the time interviews would be live. So they booked me a flight. I felt so important for those 5 minutes because it doesn't happen anymore that they book you a flight to an interview. And I nearly missed that flight because the night before the flight, I decided to watch some Pixar movies to refresh my English. I was like, okay, let's watch some Pixar movies. And I watched movies until 4 o'clock in the morning.
So prepared.
So prepared.
Fucking prepared.
And I still remember I watched Bug's Life as a movie. And I missed the alarm in the morning. So yes, I woke up that I was already, I woke up about 1 hour before the flight was supposed to take off, but the airport in Rome is down here, southwest, and I lived here, northeast. So you had to go down to the center and then cross the whole town. And I arrived at the airport right in time for the closing of the boarding gate. So I didn't manage to go through security in time. And they made a mistake in printing my ticket as well. So I did several queues, running here and there, and then finally got to the boarding gate with half an hour after the flight was supposed to depart. And I implored the people there, please, you don't understand. It's the occasion.
Did they call you on the speaker also?
No, because I didn't even check in. They couldn't.
Yes.
And when they printed my check-in, they got the wrong name as well. So I had to go back to check in. And when I got to the hostess there and I told her, please let me go, she told me, don't worry. I mean, the plane didn't even take off because it's raining. And I was thinking, whoo. And it wasn't even a heavy rain. It was just drizzling. And I was like, okay, I was really happy about that.
think
But
one of my nightmares is literally like getting to the gate late and seeing my flight going, taking off just in that moment. It's a horrible
uh,
experience.
it was for me, it was tragic, and I ran so much on that day, I didn't have any voice left, and I had to call I had to call Munich, because up there in Munich they were waiting for me, and the flight between Rome and Munich was very quick. I think it
It's a
was 1
quick
hour or
one,
so,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. And when I called Munich and I said, guys, I will be late, they laughed at me, because from their point of view I was just somebody coming from Italy, and of course I would be late. So I had to convince them that it was because of the plane, it wasn't me. So of course I got there late, and I did the interview in Munich. And the interview in Munich, of course, was the opposite side, on the opposite side of the city. The interview was here, southwest in Grunwald.
Yeah, the airport is north.
And the airport is somewhere north. I don't remember anymore. And of course, I had to cross town to get down quickly. I did the interview late, and then I lost the plane on the way back, of course, because the interview happened late. So I left in the airport, and I was woken up during the night by the police. That was my first interview.
Did they rough you up a little bit at least?
No, I mean, at the time they routinely stopped me. I don't know why the German police at the time would always stop me.
Honestly, also when I work in Munich, I got stopped many times back then. So, and it's the only city in Germany where this happened. I had to say they have a. I don't think they have enough to do, because everything is perfect in Munich. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it is like, this is the first place. Sorry to interrupt, but I still have the memory of it, and it was also fine for my interview there. It's the first time I saw, like, I was on the street and somebody threw like a box of cigarettes on the ground. And behind this guy, there was like an angry lady, and she screamed at him, and she picked the box herself and threw in the trash. I never ever saw this anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, I was told off because I crossed with the red pedestrian light, and there was no one in the street.
Ah, yes. Oh, they do.
Yeah.
They would love to
Yeah.
do that.
And there was nobody around in the street, and I was told off, and justly so, as far as they were concerned anyway, because the man said, "What if there are kids watching? Which example are you setting for them?"
You see the high morals.
Yeah, which is I get the point, but there was no one around. So in my case, after the interview, they offered me an amount of money, I remember, and I remember that my concern was how expensive it is to live in Munich. I had no idea. I really didn't know. And in Rome, I would get by with maybe 1,100 euros per month, more or less at the time. We were talking about 20 years ago. But in Munich, the offer was considerably higher. But I didn't know if it was a fair offer for the price of life in the city. And this is probably where Daniele should interject and tell us a bit about how do you find out if how fair the pay is in relation to quality of life and the place where you're going to live at. What do you think, Daniele? What would you do?
Sorry, I had a bit of a...
Sorry. So let's say that they offered you an amount of money to move to Munich. What would you do now if you had to check?
Yeah, well, okay. So now it's so much easier, like because there is websites, there is a lot of resources you can access. But I don't know if people are aware of it. Back then, I honestly, I know it sounds a lot naive, but I never bothered. I was I think it's enough money. I'll get it. Or I would try to haggle a bit more, by the way, always try to haggle a bit more, because when you're offered the sum, that sum is, is not your real value. You can always, squeeze in a little bit more. But in general, I would just accept the job and then figure out that it's very fucking expensive to live in Munich. or like in Rome, when I accepted, for me, I was coming from the countryside in Italy. From Northeast, and Northeast life is a bit cheaper than in the damn capital, right? So when they offered me the money, it was, oh my god, yeah, I'm gonna have, do fat living with this, and then I could barely pay the rent and some warm meal. So even inside the same country, you will find a lot of variation in these things. But today we have Numbio, which is one of
Numbio. So I will.
the websites you should always check.
There you go, numbio.com, cost of living. I'm going to post a link in the chat as well for everybody to check. So the website is quite useful. I mean, but I use it much less. I think Francesca and Daniele use it a lot more than I do.
But even just to check, like on a potential location where I could relocate myself in the future, just randomly check.
So I mean, if I check Munich there, let's see what happens. I don't really know how to use the platform, to be honest, because I don't use it that much. But you see in here that it tells you that how much an inexpensive restaurant meal costs, and on average, how much it costs to invite out a date, to tell them that you are cool because you work in animation, and then
it doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work anymore, right? Now you have to do something else. I invested in Bitcoin 10 years ago.
Yeah, that would probably work.
And it tells you a lot about the cost of things in that country. So this way you get an idea of how much things are costing. And I think one of the biggest items on the list must be the rent per month. It must be that. So in here,
a lot, but that's a city center and outside center, which is a good information.
Which is really useful. I mean, when I came to London, I used to think that London Zone 2 was already too far away from the center. Cute.
Very cute, yes.
So yes, I used to think. I remember. I mean, London is immense, right? Let's go and have a look to just appreciate how big the town is on the Google map. So I think Zone 2 of London is probably. So this is London, and we're talking about how many kilometers is this thing? It's immense. Let's see. You're talking about something like almost 40 kilometers wide. And Zone 2 is, I think Zone 2 is roughly this zone here inside London. And I used to live here, and the work was somewhere over here. And I used to
in the center.
Yeah, I was in the center. I could get to work in 20 minutes by bicycle.
I thought you were really rich when I knew where you were.
I felt rather poor in London, to be honest, because the cost of living was so high and the rent was incredibly expensive. And it still is, in my opinion.
I think one of the things that makes the huge difference in London, I think, is that if you go somewhere else that is cheaper, you can afford living on your own. While in London, you pay a huge amount of money, but you still flat share if you are like a junior artist or even a mid. I think like people start living on their own or with their partner more when they get towards like being a lead or a senior.
And I think in here, I think it's worth saying that as one of your first jobs as a junior, maybe it won't pay enough to pay living for you to be living alone in a big capital in Europe. So you will end up flat sharing. And Francesca is making a good point in here. As you progress towards lead, you can squeeze a bit more money out of your job, and then you can start considering. Considering living alone. When I came to London, I could live alone with the salary I was getting because I was coming there as a senior. But out of principle, I decided not to live alone because I felt that wasting that much money on the rent alone wasn't fair towards myself.
Well, I mean, you're just working for your landlord, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you see it in this way, you will soon reorient your priorities.
Yes, I have friends now that because I think they grew old enough that they want to live on their own, and they are in a higher position and decide to live on their own. But basically, they paying half of their salary into rent. It's a choice, and I understand their point of view. It's just really a pity that you have to pay so much. And that's why now that we're working remotely, everybody's thinking of going something cheaper.
So, for instance, in the UK, there was a boom in house being sold outside London this year. because everybody started buying houses outside because now they don't have to commute to London anymore.
Even here, even in Warsaw, it was the same trend. Like housing outside the city went up in value, and I think it's a bit everywhere for the way the pandemic changed. So.
Yeah, I think the garden as well is really looked
Yeah,
for.
having a garden
these days
makes a
in UK.
difference. So Daniele, in the chat, Renata is saying that you're a bit quiet. If you can push up the volume.
Okay.
I pushed your volume up a little bit, but
all right.
when I push the volume up, I push the volume up for everybody.
For everybody, yes. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. Does it feel better?
To me,
now?
it feels okay.
Okay.
So you check on Numbeo and you check whether how much are you going to be able to spend, or will you be spending on rent really inside and outside the city center. And then at the time we didn't use Google Map, but once you have Google Map, you can go you can go check, for instance, how long does it take to go from one place to another, and you can start seeing how long it will take you to commute. And you can also see the prices of commuting. So I think another thing to check is go on the website of the transportation system of the town you intend to live in. So TFL in the case of London, and check how much it costs to go from place A to place B. Because for instance, in London, you might well spend £200 per month to just commute, or more. I mean, there are people spending way more than this. So I think that contributes to the cost. So maybe you're sparing, I don't know, 200 euros living outside the center, but then maybe you spend 200 euros traveling towards the center every month. So you have to check if that's really worth it. And probably, and sometimes it's a math that needs to be considered. So these are probably, yeah,
it is a completely valid point. Like, again, like when you just you have to go to a place and you check the rents, and then you pretty much just do that. But transportation is very important. There's many factors that we will change these things. And obviously at the beginning you might also say, okay, any job is good to go in, but getting used to do this kind of calculation, it will be useful for later on. That for sure. Yeah.
I think the transportation is actually one of the hardest things to calculate, because even Numbeo doesn't give you like the this idea of like different zones in London. So like I think it's something that once you get into the city, you get a better understanding of how much you're gonna spend. I think realistically, you get something that's a good option from outside, and then potentially you will move again to another flat that it's more suitable once you get a better like a more comprehensive understanding of transportation and all. I think it's really rare that you get into an apartment when you move and you stay there forever on the city.
Forever.
I think I think Francesca, you're making a very good point, because when you move to a city, it doesn't matter how much you Google it. You don't know much about this city. So the chances that you will get to your dream place on the first go are a bit slim. I mean, nowadays with the fact that everybody's connected, you might have friends. So that makes it easier maybe to travel to a place and find something better. But how was your first experience with a flight in London, Francesca?
So, I mean, my experience is it started a bit differently. I didn't have a job. I actually moved to London to find a job. And at the beginning, I wasn't sure what I was going to find once I was here. And I didn't have many contacts in terms of people moving out and maybe giving me a room. So I did find a company, an agency that could give me a room for a really cheap price, to be honest. It was actually a cheap price. And I just went for it. And when I arrived in London, I still didn't know the exact address of my flat. So I had to go to the company. I had to go to the company, and I had to ask for the address, and they eventually gave it to me. So I had to figure out. It was really a sort of an extra layer of challenge, because I didn't have a smartphone. I had a London map, and they told me, okay, this is your address. I checked it on my map, no Google, nothing. I just tried to find the path to get there, and it was getting late, so it was getting dark, and it was Stratford.
It was this place.
Yes, now if I say that, I think a lot of people will think, oh, Stratford is not that bad. It depends how you look at it. I mean, it looks bad from here, but
looks
it's
like a maximum security.
They were now it's much better. These are the structures they were building for the Olympics. So
probably was looking actually like that. I mean, when I arrived, it was a really okay. There were no lights on, so at a certain point, I literally had trouble checking the street because I couldn't see where I was walking. And this is really rare in London. I mean, generally speaking, there's always light. You always feel really safe in a lot of areas in London. But this was my first day in London once I moved, and I was just looking around and I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't see my road. And I remember I just saw a policeman. I just asked him, begged him to help me for the street because I don't know why Stratford didn't have the lights on in the residential area, because again, that never happened again to me. It was just a really odd day, and the flat was really basic. It wasn't particularly clean or anything fancy. It was just like a place where to sleep. I think the worst was actually the area. And again, if you see now, Stratford looks like pretty fancy.
Yeah, it looks pretty fancy now.
Actually expensive as well. So it's nothing compared to what it was before. There are a lot of areas in London that when I came here, were a bit rough, and then today it's super expensive and they became a hippie place. But yeah, I mean, I moved out after a month and then I found a better place. And the way I found the new place, by the way, it was because I was attending an English class to improve my English, and there was one guy that was talking about Turnpike Lane, which is another area, and about him looking for a flatmate because one of the rooms was vacant, and then I went to check the house, and I went there, and I stayed there for 1 year. So that was
you moved to a better place, clearly, if you look at the pictures.
I mean,
so it looks cozy.
So Turnpike Lane is is a treasure. I think it's a hidden treasure. I even have a story of the police knocking on my door because they
at 5 o'clock in the morning, right?
I mean, it was I think 2 in the night, and they just knocked at my door because they thought someone was fighting in my room, but I was clearly sleeping. And yes, it was just funny because I basically stopped them from opening the door because I was in my pajama, and I didn't care if there was the police. I said, you can't just open the door, and they stopped. They're really nice.
Turnpike Lane certainly has a fame for itself. If you Google it, the first 10 pictures are policemen and scenes of crimes.
Something going on.
Yes, but it's a really nice area because although there are actually gangs fighting probably all the times, and sometimes someone's stabbing each other, which is not as nice, you not get involved. I mean, you are an outsider. You actually don't get involved in gang fights. So
there is an internal economy that that goes on. Yeah.
Nobody ever bothered me, and I was coming back home really, really late. This is something I really, really like in London. I couldn't do this in Rome ever.
I don't know. I had a similar experience in Rome, meaning I also lived in areas that they were not exactly the best.
No, in Rome.
However, I never felt threatened. I don't know, but that experience is really about many years ago. But
Where were you?
like between San Lorenzo, but also
San Lorenzo
Quartiere
is super
Africano
central.
But that one is
no.
okay.
Not really, not
really.
Oh, maybe I don't know, because I think
there was a lot of drug dealing and shady stuff going on. However, you don't bother them, they're not gonna bother you. So
I mean, the drug dealer even here is plenty. There are plenty. I mean, it's like we just coexist. That's their job. We do ours.
I think in London you never really feel. I mean, places can look run down and dangerous, but they don't really are like that in general. Oh, we have Max in a car.
Yeah.
Like live
I
streaming.
jumped back in. I was listening to the call from the car while I was driving to. I'm in the middle of the Hungarian countryside. Sorry.
How is the zombie apocalypse progressing, Max?
It's doing well. We are stockpiling inside this abandoned grocery store. No, I called because you guys, sorry for interrupting, but when you guys were talking about Nubeo, I think this can be a very important feature, and it's a fact that you can compare directly how much your wage compares to in the city, their current wage compares to in the target city.
Yeah, that is at the beginning of the page.
Yeah, it's on the top. Yeah. It's actually gonna
let's go back. So, quality of life comparison.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe you mean the text, just the one that is after you're covering now. Like
yeah, I think it's just down.
You see, you would need around. I don't know. Just go up a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah,
you can. Yes, exactly. So you can say, okay, I live in, for example,
I'm doing that. Yes.
And to have the same quality of life, and I earn this much, and to have the same quality of life in Amsterdam, you need this much. And I'm saying this because in one of the latest interviews that I had a job interview and an offer in Amsterdam, and that was like, oh, okay, 5,000 euros a month, and that's like more than twice of what I'm getting now. Then I went on Numbeo and I checked, and basically I found out that to have the same quality of life that I needed that I had in Budapest, I should have earned like 6,000 plus euros in Amsterdam. And this changed a bit my perspective because, for example, like raising kids is 5 times more expensive than raising kids in Budapest. And then you can check the crime rate. You guys were talking about the crime rate, how much is the social security, like how much it costs if you get, I don't know, you have diarrhea and need to run to the office.
It's really.
I mean, I lived in Mexico, and that's stuff that matters, right?
Yeah. You know, it does. Also, I mean, even between European countries, like health costs are different, and this thing I was never exposed to. I was never exposed to this problem while I was in Italy, obviously. But when you go in Germany, you have a sort of separate taxation that is going to be taken from your salary regardless. Okay. However, when I came to Poland, it was an option. So, for example, here I could opt out from the national health system, but then it means that you know, if something bad happens and they pick you up with, yes, you have to fully pay all the expenses. So, I mean, you kind of want to have this national insurance, but it was not mandatory. And of course, this will change. You know, it might change things also for you, because you can say, okay, fuck it, I'm only gonna work for 4 months. Well, you could, right? And I'm not gonna do this. Or
if I can, out of personal experience, I went to work in Dubai for 3 months.
Yeah, there you go.
I spent 20 days in the hospital.
there you fucking go. That nice 3 months.
So and back then, like I had an insurance, luckily, but eventually, since I was working for the government, they paid for that. But that would have cost me around $60,000.
Yeah,
you have to pay to pay.
Yeah. So shit happens. Yeah.
But I think usually you can have the insurance, I guess, like the temporary insurance that could cover. Depends on how long you stay, how long you want to stay. I think like I opt out from the pension scheme here in England. But now you get automatically enrolled in the private ones. So just because I don't know if I want to stay in London and in UK, so for now I just opted out. So it's just a matter of like checking, hidden taxation, I guess.
Yeah, so this is a very good point, because it reminds me that when I moved to Germany, I did a research about taxation because I wanted to know. I mean, they offered me some money, and I, just like Daniele, I said yes without thinking. And then I realized that I was paid much less than other people in Germany because I was coming from a nation that was more in troubles than
Third world
Germany.
country, sorry.
Yeah. So I remember I researched taxes, and I stumbled into a tax that would take 8% of your salary monthly.
Oh,
And
that one.
yeah, and it was called the Kirchner Steuer. It was the tax of the church. So
oh my God. Oh my
yeah,
God, yes. I know this one. I know this
you know that one, right? So if you move to Germany and you register as a resident there, they will ask you a very innocent question: what's your religion? Now, if you tick the wrong box and you say you're Catholic, Evangelist, Baptist, I don't remember, then they automatically withdraw 8% out of your salary automatically. And in order to deregister, you have to pay, I think, a fee of 50 euros, and you can't deregister immediately. There was this thing. And then I was thinking, well, surely if I say I have no profession, I mean, I have no religion, then surely the government will take that 8%, right? Because, I mean, it's taxes. And no, nobody would take it. It would just stay with me. So before moving to a country, you really need to check what's the tax.
This thing was crazy. This thing was crazy. when I learned of it, and thankfully I learned in time. So when they ask me this, I say that I'm agnostic, whatever is like when you have
agnostic,
right? But my colleague, which is Carlo Rotolo from, he was actually, he didn't know, and then he said Christian Catholic, right? And so he was paying this crazy 8% tax to the Catholic Church, and to go out, not only, as you said, you had to pay a fee for the practices, whatever, but he had to provide the paper that he was discommunicate, like
that he didn't have a baptism.
Yes, no, it has that I hereby go out of the Christian religion. Okay,
Wow.
And the stamp is an inverted cross. What is that?
Yeah, like a pentacle or something.
And while you're being blasphemous, I'm very sorry but it's too offensive, so I need to sign out.
Yes. especially you, blasphemous. Yes.
I keep listening to you guys. Good luck.
So
Max.
and
Bye,
this
bye.
And then just small parenthesis here. When I told this story to my very Catholic mom, she was like, "Oh, and what did you do? If you don't go out of the church, I will pay for you."
Wow, that's
She said, "I will give you the 8%." And I said, "Mom, don't worry. I just said like this, and there is no problem, right?" But
I did ask.
Yes.
I did ask some of my colleagues, what is this tax for? What do people? What is the money employed for? But nobody knew. I mean, I'm sure that there is a plan, a financial plan to use that money, but the common people didn't seem to know at the time what it was used for. So, which for me was a bit dodgy. I mean,
well, it is dodgy, of course, and as you said, it's not money that goes in some form to the government. It's money that you get back to your pocket, and then I can choose the charity I want. I can actually see where this money goes, and not just the random.
So how much was it?
Well, it was 8%. So let's.
It was there, I think.
Okay.
It's fucking huge.
It is. I mean, I made the math and I thought, okay, let's. It's a hypothesis. We earn, I don't know, 2,000 euros, which I don't think it was the right import, and then we find out what's 8% of it. No, that's not it. That would be incredible. So that would be 160 euros per month that they take away. So
it's quite a lot.
Yeah, consider that in Munich we would pay 800 euros for a room in the center, and plus, I don't know, maybe 50 for the internet at the time. So you can pay a big chunk of it.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just thinking that it's more than the pension scheme that
you're paying.
Yeah, I mean,
pension.
It's more than the pension scheme. So you really have to be careful, and and because these 160 euros may be the difference between you living in a flat share with 10 people and you in London and you living in a flat share with 5 people, for instance. So it really does affect the quality of your life. So you really need to do some research. Thank God nowadays it's a lot easier. But I remember a colleague of mine, and I found out about this church tax a lot earlier than before I went to Germany, of course, because I was doing some research. But a friend of mine, whom I met in Munich, I remember that he already spoke German, so in a way you could say he had an advantage. But he didn't realize what he was getting himself into, and I couldn't warn him because I didn't know. He didn't know, and I didn't know him at the time. So, and then we discussed this thing, and he told me when he was deregistering, he told me the costs of deregistering. You had to pay some sort of deposit, almost as if I don't know, like for your soul or something. when you deregistered, when you unregistered. I think going back a second to the point Max was making on Numbeo. In fact, at the beginning, you see that here I'm comparing the cost of Munich and London, and at the beginning of the page you find the amount of money you would need in London to maintain the same standard of living that you would get in Munich, and that's the number that Max was referring to. You have to really see if it's worth it for you in terms of quality of life.
This is so important. Like, for example, when I was working in Crytek in Frankfurt, I was getting I don't know, a certain salary, and again at the time it felt good to see the number. But then when you actually live in Frankfurt, and Frankfurt is a city that is mostly bankers and investors, and the money was even good, but you just felt like poor because everybody else is really rich in there, right? And so even if you whatever, right? Because I could still have a good lifestyle and everything. However, I don't know. I wouldn't easily take a taxi if I go for drinks and then I'm like a bit drunk, right? And which never really happens, but. And then I want to get a taxi instead of getting public transport, then I would think twice in Frankfurt, right? I would say, well, maybe I'll just walk it.
Walk home.
Yes. And I don't know, in a city instead like Warsaw, where cost of life is cheaper compared to the salary, then you say, well, it's not a problem. So, obviously, I think when you're like young and you go for junior positions, it's good to care a bit about these things, but not too much, because you want to get your foot into the industry, you want to get started. And this is the way many of us started, like sharing apartment, maybe many people, like I don't know. I think I remember in Rome, for example, I had in Rome I changed my room or apartment every 3-4 months. It was a bit
sounds about right. Yes.
My first years were a bit ridiculous on that side, and at some point I was like hosted by a friend of a friend, but then the girl wanted to get another because she didn't want to have tenants for a long time, so because she liked to change tenants. Okay, so I had to look for a new place, and then I couldn't find it, and then I ended up in, I think, the worst situation I've ever been in my life. And it was like a big apartment where it was like this wizened old lady that she was renting the rooms, but there were like many rooms, like eight rooms, okay? And it was renting only to guys, and the guys were coming from a bit all Italy and doing any kind of job you could do in Rome, also rough jobs and whatever it was. And there was no rules, kinda, and then that means the bathroom was so bad, and this lady was also not caring much because she was making a lot of money out of us, right? Out of all of us. But this bathroom was so bad that she didn't even clean it much. She just threw newspaper pages on the pavement. I'm not even joking. Okay, so I lived into this condition for like 2 months before managing to find the next thing. But I think less than this situation, I would have slept under a bridge probably.
She could have I don't know, thrown straw onto the floor of the bathroom.
Jesus
the
Christ,
bathroom.
that was I think I don't say this story too much, but it was I think one of the lowest points of my life. Because I had no other possibility to go. The money was not that great, and I mean, again, the money was probably okay in my position. It's just that you had to spend so much for the rent, and I didn't think about that prior to go to Rome, and that was it. So, I mean, it is experiences. There is worse, of course. So
yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, and I remember in London, a Spanish guy. I had to be the translator of a Spanish guy in London in an electronics shop, because he wanted an electric generator, a diesel one, and I asked him why he needed that for, and the guy was living in a house which didn't have any electricity. So I think there are situations that
there is everything, yes.
that we can even imagine. In general, I think this raises another point: living with your landlord. I think
yes.
Francesca has a good opinion about that. What do you think about living with the landlord?
Oh, when did I live with my landlord? Wait a second, because I don't generally live. No, no, you lived with your landlord.
I did.
I
Daniele
never.
did. You never. So what's right? So what's your why?
Yeah, the reason for that is because already having the landlord outside the house for me was annoying, because I remember in Rome, this was actually a problem more in Rome. I didn't find the same issue in England. I think like privacy is much more respected in generally. But I think when, because I was in Rome for a university, and when you are a student, like I don't know, I think like the landlord generally understands that you probably like a dickhead, and it's probably gonna break the house apart. So there is this tendency that they always enter in the house without previous notice, and the reason for that is because maybe they have like a small compartment with their stuff, and they have to go and grab it.
Actually, it's so common, yes.
Yes, and it's like in Rome, it was every time it was like that. It was all the time. And it was really annoying because then you would leave maybe on holiday, you would come back and you know someone was there. It wasn't your flatmate. And I had really funny stories about like some of my flatmates. One of my flatmates, at a certain point, just put like coins behind his door, so that like just piling them up, so that when the landlady opened the door, they would fall on the floor, and he would know that she entered the house.
You do a trap. Well, basically, it is a trap.
So I mean, it wasn't like they never done anything like extreme, but really the feeling that they can always get into the house anytime, it was really annoying. I really hated it. And then when I came in England, that wasn't happening, so that was good. Actually, I do have a story. I mean, but it's weird. I mean, in a way, I can't even say that my experience with landlords was bad, because actually, now that I remember, I lived twice with landlords in Rome, and it was actually probably the best times. But it really depends. So in Rome, the people I found were, I think they were just really good. I think it was a case, because then the situation that I've seen in London were totally different. I think when the landlord is in the house, it tends to check on you and to make sure you do certain things in a certain way. And I remember visiting a house where just while I was trying to find a place, and there was this landlord. That while he was looking around and showing us the rooms, he was checking what a girl was doing in the kitchen and how she was cleaning. And I think he told her off, saying like she was supposed to clean in a different way. And that seems like almost like slavery to me. So I was like, well, no. And
was there a chain as well?
Maybe I didn't notice it, but it was there. And I think another situation is that they do feel like, and I think it's pretty normal. It's their house, and they feel like.
I know, but it's not a good vibe, and it just.
Well, it's not to excuse them, because you're renting the house, so you shouldn't complain. But I feel like the common spaces are theirs. So if you have like a living room, they occupy the living room. They watch a movie and they just spend the time there. And it's not really your space, so you're literally stuck in your room. And even for the kitchen, you have to queue for it. So it really depends. I mean, again, my personal experience, I found 2 cases where the families where I was living with were so nice and so relaxed and so open-minded that I didn't have problems, but I did check on their personality before moving in. While in London, I just wouldn't do it, and I think I'm too grown up for doing that.
Yeah, at some point, I would say pretty soon, but I think after, I don't know, 28, 29,
Yeah.
you're just sick of the shit.
Yeah, I think at around 27 you start feeling like you
Yes.
want to live
Yeah,
a bit more alone.
too
And
much.
I think it's natural. I think when I started, I didn't really mind it. I thought it was the only way to do it anyway. I didn't even think of living alone. I mean, I automatically looked for a room because it was the cheapest thing to do. So that was it. I mean, I didn't even have the money for the first deposit of the room myself. So I really had to go for the cheapest thing I could really.
I mean, at that age, you might even feel like you probably feel really lonely if you live on your own as well. You are in a new house, in a new city, alone in a room, an apartment. I think it also makes
perfectly fine.
You have to remember when you were 23 or 24. I think I was actually super fine with flat sharing at the time. I think the more I grew up, the more I thought I wanted to stay on my own, and I was fine not seeing anybody, which sounds really bad. But
I think everybody is different, and flat sharing can be a double-edged sword in a way, because they can introduce your flatmates can introduce you to that place where you live. I mean, remember you're coming from abroad, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a first introduction to the place where you live, but at the same time, maybe that's the very thing that prevents you from opening up to the outside world and go explore. So I think there are both factors, and then everybody is different. But I would like to move on a little bit in here before it becomes a complaint about flat shares.
It sounds
because
sounds
I
a
think,
bit like that, yes.
Yeah, because I think we were talking about quality of life, and I think at that stage one has probably to understand that you do not really need to go to a big capital to be happy. Although a lot of people, they have an interest in seeing the big capitals and so forth. So there are also smaller places. I mean, Max went to Budapest, which is a big capital, but it's much cheaper than the capitals of West Europe, for instance. And you, Daniel, you are in Poland, which is also much cheaper.
And I mean, also in case of Warsaw, like, I don't know, I guess it's not as much as known as other, of course, European capitals. However, when I came here, also, I didn't know, I did check Numbeo back then. However, I didn't know what to expect from the city, but I have to say, just by being a capital, there is still so much going on and so many things you can check. And for example, there is tons of vegan restaurants here for some reason. Like, you will find, I never found so many as in here. So in the end, just by being a capital, I think is a couple of pluses. You know what I mean? Because there is much more going on in general. And honestly, after a few months that I was here, I really like it here, and I felt it was I had just a good vibe or a good feeling in general.
So you do not need to go to super famous capitals.
Yeah, you don't need to go to London, basically.
Yeah. No, in fact,
I think like everybody in London at the moment is thinking like, well, if I can work remotely, I can move out.
Why would I stay in London? That's the general way of thinking. Yes. And but let's say you have received an offer. How would you know if that offer makes sense? I mean, apart from the cost of living. Okay, so let's say you went to Numbeo, you say, you know what, it seems like I can make a living with this. But that's in the context of the cost of life. But in the context of the industry. So say you find a game animation job and they offer you X amount of money. How do you know that's the price?
And we're stepping onto Glassdoor here.
This is the...
And friends.
So I'm pretty sure Max will probably call us now because he doesn't agree with Glassdoor. So
actually, I can cover Max's side because I also don't like Glassdoor too much. For these reasons, I can explain, sure. But,
okay, so let me introduce Glassdoor. Yeah. Sorry, let me introduce Glassdoor, and then I will let you say yours. but not much probably. So Glassdoor is, for me, it's kind of useful because it's a website in which you can, if you're logged in with Google, I don't know if you can check for jobs without being logged in. It's for free, and you can check salaries for relevant jobs. So it gives you an idea of how much people are paid in a certain industry, which is good in a way. I think one of the shortcomings of a Glassdoor is really that there isn't necessarily much data. Not all the data is current, probably. So there are these downsides. So usually, if I have to compare a commercial value with the offer I've received, I would cross-check maybe something like Numbeo, Glassdoor, and then I would go and look for job openings. So I would really, let's say I'm doing gameplay animator, or maybe I should check positions that I'm more familiar with. So junior animator job, I would actually Google stuff, and I would start, finding around advertisement for jobs, and I would see sometimes in the advertisement they give you the range. So for instance, here Glassdoor says there is an animator job at DNEG London, posted 14 days ago, and Glassdoor says in DNEG, that's the company, the average salary for a senior animator goes between 53 grand and 70 grand per year. And an animator seems to be from 22k to 68k, which
it's a giant range.
It's a giant range. As far as I know, it's also pretty accurate. I mean, if you're an ultra junior in London, you start at around 20 something. Usually.
That's accurate, but the top part, I think I'm not sure I agree with the top salary, because I think I'm seeing a trend right now, and it looks like the salaries are much more aligned across the companies right now. And I might be wrong on that, because obviously I don't know every single salary, but I get the feeling that don't know why, if it's because the company talk to each other, but you do feel
the companies certainly do talk to each other, and that's why, for instance, in London, some sort of trade union named Back2 came to life at a certain point, just when I left visual effects, I remember. So there are companies talking to one another. That's as far as I knew back then. And that's why, I mean, Glassdoor would be a good way to know if there's a job and what's the general pay of an area, but you shouldn't get too attached to it, because maybe these salaries are based on London, and then you move out and there you find entirely different salaries. And I think Glassdoor alone is not meant to give you a very, very detailed picture. So whenever there is a new job in a company and I receive an offer, usually I go on LinkedIn and I found people who work in that company, and I maybe ask them how it is worked in the company. Is the money enough? You can't call someone and just say, hey, how much do you make? But you can certainly ask them if what's the range maybe of salaries in that area, and what do they think about
not as the first question, obviously, but
no, but
I like this approach. I think a lot of people are intimidated by just contacting directly somebody. However, I found that this is the most effective way. Even if you don't have a direct friendship or knowledge of somebody in the company, you can still try your luck. Somebody is gonna answer, and honestly, sometimes I also receive this kind of questions through LinkedIn, and I don't find it annoying. Of course, as I said, you don't want to go too much in specific, but you can ask the general vibe. You can ask the average range of salaries, so that it's not like a crazy secret thing in that sense. So
yeah, I also asked people who stopped working there. So maybe I received an offer from a company, and I remember one of my colleagues told me, you know what, that company didn't pay me. And I was like, are you
That
sure?
was
Are you
evil.
sure? But they told me, but yeah, that's many years ago, they said, and they were going through hardships, they said. I was like, okay. Then I found someone who just finished working for that company. Maybe they stopped 2 months ago, and I contacted them and said, look, I received an offer from this company, but I don't know them. And somebody told me they're having troubles setting accounts. So what was your experience? And they told me, I worked for them for the past 5 years, never happened. So they always paid. So it's a good idea to get in touch. Daniele is making a good point there. It's people won't be annoyed if you ask at least directions, because the fact is you don't know anything until you're inside. I mean, you think you know stuff, you watch YouTube videos, but you don't really know much about something until you are inside. And this is the closest you can get to inside while being outside. So I would do it. I had people telling me without even asking the precise salary I would have gotten.
You're gonna get.
You
remember.
particularly.
I remember when I was, because I was, so I do the interviews for Lighting and Comps at Blue Zoo, and I think I think a lot of people that comes from France, for instance, they do ask me, and I think really genuinely, like they were maybe like a junior artist that comes straight from school, and they just ask me like, oh, just want to know the salary, if it's okay, if you can live with it. It's really, really cute. I think it's like, and I mean, it's just even like in the interview, I can't say like what we pay as a company, because this is not my job role. It's actually HR that does it. But I mean, at least I can reassure them, telling them, like the range that we usually offer, you can live with that. You can do this and this, but maybe you can't maybe live on your own, but you can have like a decent flat, and you can't maybe go to concert every day. But so it's still an indication. I think even some people don't like to talk about salaries, and sometimes you cannot because of the situation, but still giving
Well, honestly, most of the companies, you have a non-disclosure agreement on salary, so
Yeah.
you definitely don't want. You're most probably not gonna get a number, but as Francesca said, you can get an idea of what you can do with it, and that is more than enough to get started, I would say.
I think Daniele is raising another very good point. You have to keep in mind, I was always stunned by this. Whenever I read the contract, there was a clause somewhere saying, you know what, the salary is secret. You're not supposed to tell anybody. How can it be? So if you're asking people and they give you some data, don't go to recruitment and say, you know what, this dude told me he makes this much money and I should make the same.
I think that actually happened as well in the company. So like, I think it does happen sometimes. So that's why you have to be careful.
Everything happened. Companies have been, everything happened. So yes.
And there is these things about like pay rise as well. Like if you ask and then you're given the pay rise, and then maybe you go around and saying, "Oh, I've been given the pay rise," and then everybody
go back to the office. Yeah.
You suckers.
There's a fine balance and diplomacy there. I mean, you can't just go around.
But I found that in any case, I found out that communication within a company, people discussing how things work, is really useful. I mean, sometimes I found myself in companies and I felt that I really needed to be paid a bit more. Of course, everybody feels the same way, but in my opinion, I had grounds to ask that, and I, like everybody else, I suppose. And I remember that I went straight to recruitment and told them that. And they looked at me as in, who are you? And I just left. I got nothing, of course. And then I very timidly asked a colleague, how does it work? I mean, how the promotion works? And they told me, you have to first tell your supervisor that you're thinking about the promotion. And then he will go to recruitment and he will prepare the ground for you. And then you can ask recruitment, or they will organize a meeting for you and blah, blah, blah. So you have to also ask around how things work, because maybe when negotiation is always possible. That's the ground. Always. There's always a certain leeway of negotiation. And I always found that. At the beginning, I didn't know you could negotiate. But once I realized that, well, you can negotiate. But you have to also know how. and what's the boundary? I mean, if you read that, I don't know, this company is offering, for instance, 23 to 30K, and at the interview they ask you how much do you expect to earn here, and you say 70, then you are not understanding the limits. I mean, why should they pay you 70 and not somebody else 35, for instance? So you have to, that's also why you need to talk. You need to understand what's the general range, because the mission of a company is to produce something spending as little money as possible. Although when you watch certain movies, you find it hard to believe that's really the mission. But and so they will try to pay as little as possible. I mean, within reason, of course. So you have to. There will be a general tiering inside the company of how. I mean, seniors will be paid more or less the same amount, and juniors and so forth. But it's through negotiation that you squeeze out a little bit. And I mean, it comes to my mind that in Italy, for instance, people would, I think companies in the past, I don't know how it is now, would take advantage of internships. Internships were there you go. Internships were seen in Italy at the time, I don't know if this changed, as free employment. So in practice, they would take someone who could operate a computer or 3D software, pay them nothing, and expect them to be thankful because they were letting you do what you wanted to do, which was playing with the computer. It was more or less
doing your dreams.
Yeah, you're living the dream. You even want to get paid for it. So I mean, even if you find yourself in the UK, things are a lot more civilized in that sense. I never heard of a free internship. I think it's illegal to do one.
You get paid. I think you get paid.
I have to say, I remember in Crytek, I think they had one of the best internships systems I ever saw, because they would to the intern they would give an apartment. Like the intern did not have to look for rents, and he had like a mini apartment for himself. Didn't have to apartment share or anything, and the apartment was paid directly by the company.
Wow, amazing!
And then they would give you, of course, salary. Obviously, not amazing, but it was a decent salary to buy food and save extras. And as I said, like you didn't have to care about the apartment yourself. And I was amazed when the interns told me, should I get hired as intern? No, knowing that you go to a place and you don't have to take care of this kind of logistics, it's a great deal, honestly. And I'm just quoting this because I remember I was impressed back then. Yeah.
It just reminds me about me in Rome, which I actually was really lucky. I was paid, and I was paid. I think it started with 300 euro, so I was hardly paying my rent, and then it was supposed to go up. And I remember because at the end of the internship, I went to my boss and I said, "Okay, you promised that by the end of the internship, I should earn this amount of money." And he said, "Well, that's what I'm paying." And basically, the trick in his mind was that he was paying me that amount, but that obviously wasn't counting the fact that you have to pay taxes on it. So what I was earning was actually still the same when I was starting. Yeah.
I remember I did an internship when I was in high school. It was for a small internet provider. I stayed there 1 month, and the guy said me at a certain point we got a job to do in Flash, and Flash was new, so I learned Flash then. And the owner said, well, if we do the job, and then at the end. He said at the end of the internship you will get something. Okay, about
something.
I think it was about 100 euros, 150 euros for 1 month.
A wine in a
yeah, and then when the month was over, I went to him and I said, okay, that's it. And he said, well, yes. And
he took out the pockets.
he drew out of the pocket 50 euros. And he gave it to me, and I stared at the 50 euros, and I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything, and I didn't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I asked, I would have gotten the full amount, right? Yes. But I didn't really have the heart to ask. I was like, okay, thank you, mister.
Bring the really important point, which is crucial when you start working. Always discuss money before.
Always.
Yeah, okay.
Always.
I mean, it is obviously, but
obviously, but I wasn't to me.
Actually, all this memory of the first job made me remember my first job in Rome. That I they told me, okay, this is gonna be your salary. But then I didn't know where to stay for the first months. And then the owner of the company said, well, I'm gonna rent you one apartment. So basically he was paying me the salary and I was giving back the salary as rent.
You were paying the
Oh,
rent back to
geez.
him.
So
I mean, that's local economy.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Like the way you just get rolled around.
But I think, what was it? I had an internship. Yeah, I had another internship for another internet service provider, because in the 90s, internet service providers would grow up like mushrooms in Italy. And I remember the dude said, I said, well, how much for the internship? And he said, well, nothing, he said. And then I said, well, expenses. I mean, I had to take the bus and pay the monthly. And he said, well, write down the expenses. I'm not saying I will pay them. Okay, he said, but maybe at the end I will cover some of them.
Really
And as the end of the internship was approaching, the guy just stopped coming to the office. And I would always ask my colleagues, where's the owner? And they said, oh, I don't know. And so one day I just said, guys, that's it, goodbye. I mean, how long do we have to go on with this? The guy became a ghost when he was about. So I never got anything. And from then on, I always negotiated beforehand. And I wouldn't even start working if the money wasn't clear. And if you find yourself in a situation, I found out on my skin, of course, that if you find yourself in a situation where people say, oh, I have no money to pay you for this job, then you have to keep in mind that they need somebody to do the job. So, well, you can, let's say you really want that job, you can say, can you pay for traveling expenses? Can you pay for the rent? Can you pay for food?
Yeah,
I mean, I mean, and you can openly say, look, if I can't pay transport, I can't come to do the job. I mean, that usually resonates in these situations, because you're telling them, if I can't pay the transportation to get to your office, then I can't get the job done. They need the job done, and they don't want to pay for it. They might as well pay for a bus ticket if you're shy of asking for money, because at the beginning, I remember, you're never quite sure if your skills are good enough. You always think that that you need to be a superhero of CG to do something. So I think Francesca is making a good point again, and as in you need to be sure, you need to negotiate this salary before accepting a job, because otherwise, are you going to trust that at the end, and even if the other person is in good faith, which they often are, you don't know what their expectations are. And I mean, maybe they were thinking that 500 euros was enough for 2 months, and maybe they weren't. And maybe you were thinking you wanted to have 10 grand.
I think psychologically is the fact that if you plan together this ahead, then you're ready to, one person is ready to pay and the other person knows what to expect. If you don't plan it ahead, both parties will probably be disappointed, or one of them. So it's just a really practical, and just be prepared mentally help a lot in the process.
Yeah.
I think it's really, maybe we should make a point that in England, for instance, like you hardly have to think about these things, because the negotiation happens before, and it's really structured.
Yes.
In Italy, it wasn't like that, but in some studios, it is approached this way now. So it really depends. I think you just need to understand that in some countries and some cities, you shouldn't give for granted the fact that you're gonna be paid and paid how much you want to be paid. In other countries and other cities, you might be more relaxed about it.
Yeah,
I really don't have to worry about checking my salary and my pay. My pay slip in the studio at the moment.
Yeah, and also I remember another consideration I started making when I was a bit more experienced was if they wanted me to accept a job and leave one, and they offered little money, I would tell them openly, guys, I'm leaving this job to come to your place. So I was expecting a little bit more incentive to do so. I mean, if I limit the job to go to something where they pay me less, my quality of life is going to be significantly lower in exchange of maybe a shinier title, or then
Look,
But
this is always a consideration to make, trade glory for money, kinda. But I don't know. After many years, I, maybe it's sad to say, but there is no glory. So
there is there is no glory. Well, there are. I mean,
there is. Okay.
there is some sort of prestige
Yeah,
factor.
yes, there is a prestige factor in working in certain companies, and there is also personal satisfaction. That doesn't mean so. The projects I work in my life, I'm pretty much proud of most of them. So it's not that I see them as, oh, okay, I just did the job and I got the money, right? Else I wouldn't be doing this kind of job in the industry. However, I would say money is very important, and you should never go to a new place for less money. Like, this just feels wrong.
I think it's. I actually watched a documentaries about happiness recently about the places in North Europe, and it apparently is a fact that like above. I mean, as soon as if you reach like a certain salary, that you don't worry anymore about money, and above that there are other things that are important. So I think like when I need to decide whether to get a job, I think like I also take into consideration like overtime, because for me it's really 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 important to have like free time. So like I think I'm really happy that I've never gone to certain studio where I know people were doing lots of overtimes, and I think like I don't at certain points, as long as I'm paid I'm a salary that makes me feel comfortable with my lifestyle, then I'm happy to go and stay in places where I don't have to do overtime, and I don't have to get stressed, or and maybe I don't have to do things 300 times as well. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking.
That's almost a topic for another conversation,
Yeah,
I
almost,
think.
yes.
Yeah, but I think there's going back to the prestige factor. I have to make a point in here. I remember that around in the meantime in the chat there's Polly Level from India who's asking us about what do we think about the Indian animation industry. And I don't know much about the Indian animation industry, but I want to come back to that subject a bit later. But I was saying, prestige. I remember in around 2008, I think, I applied at a company, a big company in London, and I remember they didn't answer, and I applied twice. And then I found myself working in Madrid on Planet 51. And I remember that the moment I told the English company I worked on this movie, they answered immediately. So there is this fact for which certain companies used to look at the names you had in the curriculum, and the names alone would open sometime the door to a conversation. So if you are so inclined, you can make a cold-blooded calculation of where you have to go in order to get to somewhere else. So that's something that could happen. Although I start to think that at the time, to find the level of animation you will find in Planet 51, it was very difficult in Europe. But nowadays, the content is so well animated for the most part that I think this prestige factor is much less important. Although, of course, if you come to a company with a very big name, then they are going to at least have a look at your show reel. I think, probably. Or maybe not, because they don't really look at the show. They don't really read the CV before looking at the show reel. So the show reel really rules in here. So I think there's this element of prestige in which sometimes a very glossy project opens the door, and sometimes you do the investment, you're paid a little bit less. But I'm less and less agreeing with this as I grow older. So I'm not. I never thought that way, but I realized that happened, and so I have to make a point and say, look, it happened.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, obviously, the name of the company will have its weight, and it's always to be taken in consideration. Actually, all these topics of salary and companies made me realize one thing also, that um, some juniors that I interacted with in my careers, they didn't have it this clear in mind. But when you join a company for a specific salary, okay? And even when you will increase your, improve your role inside the company, this salary will probably not increase in the same way if you came from outside the company.
Yes.
And this
Yeah.
is such a basic rule that means TLDR change a lot of companies. Like you go as a junior, you go in a place, you're gonna work 1-2 years, and then you're gonna move out. This is the fastest way for you to increase your salary over a period of 6-7 years, something like that.
Although I think Francesca has a different opinion on this, so I will let her
Okay,
answer
okay.
to this.
I think it's because again I don't want to shout this too loud, but I'm not so salary oriented. I think like in general, again, I just want to make sure like the studio where I'm going is like a place where I feel comfortable, and I think the fact that you stay for a long time in a studio opens some doors for you. So like it means like I think like in terms of like how you work, I noticed like after a few years that I was in the same studio, in this case Blue Zoo, I had much more a say on what I could do. I had much more creative freedom. I could make decision or generally give my opinion, and my opinion was heard. And then that's where I grew up. Like so, basically, I step up in the company quick enough because a lot of people were leaving. So I think, I mean, obviously, I don't know. I hope it was also because of my capabilities.
Hopefully, yes.
I think like one of the pattern I saw, that a lot of people tend to change company a lot, and this is, as you say, it's an easy way to actually get to like the job you want, to the better salary, but it's also sometimes can be a missed opportunity, or at least can give someone else a good opportunity. So I think like because a lot of people in a certain period were leaving the company, the level of expertise like dropped drastically, and then suddenly like people like me, they were generally like quite young in the company in terms of like experience in the company, could raise.
Sure, you have a good chance. Yes.
And I think it was really a good opportunity. I think I don't regret staying. I think it's
obviously. Sorry to interrupt, but it's always you have to consider the environment around you.
Yes, I did like the environment.
Yes, and the thing that I'm saying to jump company, it is a thing that, in my opinion, you want to do at the start when you want to burn those titles like junior, standard, and then land to a senior position, because senior position means better salary, and but also, as you say, you invested in the company, meaning that you like the environment, you like it is a double-sided promise of some sort. I don't know how to describe, but
yeah, no, it's true. Like if it wasn't like that, I wouldn't have done.
Yes.
So I would have jumped company for sure.
I would say these are maybe a bit more rare examples, but of course you have to be aware of your surrounding and see if the place you are in, you like it so much that you want to invest more years of your time in it.
I think it's like when you decide to stay in a company, it's definitely a lot of investment. I think I got to a point, to be honest, like, and this is probably get to the point where I explain why now, at the moment, I'm lead of lighting and comp. And like a few months ago, I was supervising a big project. And it's because like sometimes you get so involved, and while people are leaving and you stay there, that it becomes like a big task for you. And after like 4 years, I was like constantly supervising. I felt like, okay, maybe like I need a break because it was getting a bit too much, like mentally, and also in terms of time. It was like, I think while you can avoid a lot of time over time in good companies, usually when you get to the supervising role, that something is unavoidable. And so after a lot of years, you think like, okay, maybe I need to take a break and do something that's not so much where you're not so much in charge of big teams. And so like I think like I'm still invested in the company, but I just wanted to have less responsibility in terms of like the project itself. So it is like you just need to assess the situation every time. I think it's not like a set in stone that you will stay in a company forever, and it's not set in stone that you will leave it. But I think just consider what you want. Like if it's salary what you want, change company a lot. If you find like the environment is good, maybe consider staying, because there are a lot of company. Maybe I mean like companies goes through cycles. So some companies in a period of time are really good, have a good atmosphere, and sometimes there is another period where they don't. So
that's true.
yeah, it's like if you find a good environment, don't give it for granted, because it's actually a really nice it's
Yeah,
nice to work in that kind of environment.
you don't always find a good environment, and also whenever you change a company you have to prove yourself over and over. So I mean, you have to first impress the people there, and you have to leave a mark before you can be trusted, even if maybe you're already up to par, if you see what I mean. Maybe you're already good enough, but they don't know you, so they have to buy into what you do. And then there is also another factor, which we have a message from PK Maniac on the chat, in the chat, which is a very, I think it's a very good question. Yes, he says, do you find in general that people recruiters value more when they see someone has stayed at a studio for a long time, or if they have jumped often to different studios? And I think I think that's a very good question, because in my opinion, if I see that someone has jumped 1 week here, 1 week there, 1 month here, 1 month there, I'm not sure if he's jumped because he was kicked out, or if he's jumped because he's jumping.
So
I mean, I don't know. What do you think,
I can
Francesca?
tell you what I think when I look into CVs, and when I see people jumping a lot, especially when they're junior and they jump a lot from a production to another. First of all, obviously, I check if they were commercials for his advertisement, because advertisement is generally short. But if they were films or like productions and they jumped a lot, that doesn't give me like an incredible good impression. And I tend to, and it's like, this is again, it's also like the mentality in the studio or the project you are hiring for. So when I was hiring for production, which usually is our contract about like 1 year, 1.5 years, I think is really important, because like if people keep like jumping around, it means that they will leave halfway through the project. And this happens a lot. And obviously on a personal level, I'm not going to hate anybody that leaves the project through, but I have to admit that I probably won't hire them again. And it's incredible how good memory someone can have in the industry, because the industry is not that big. So like, I think you have to be careful to your reputation, and in a good way. So like, if you commit to a job, try to stay until the end. And if you're not sure that you will stay until the end, I think if you say it, it gives a much better impression. And I had cases, to be honest, it's not such a black and white. I had cases where people would tell me like, I'm not sure I can stay until the end, but I don't want to create problem for the company. And they would give me like maybe a longer notice, and we would agree on that. And I think this is like a really good way of talking it through. There are other people that just left with the short notice, and this is like, obviously, that if someone asked me about these people, I wouldn't recommend them. So I think it's just be careful, be mindful. The industry is not that big that you can just do whatever you want and just keep changing company.
People are not disposable in general, and
I want to answer the other side of the question.
Go ahead.
So I think, Francesca, you said very well about the thing you look for. If a person switch a lot of jobs, I need to be sure that they finish the project they were in. Okay, because finishing the project for me is the kind of divider that tells if you like, you're gonna have a well, yes, if you are reliable or not, basically. In games, a project can last 4 years, 5 years. So maybe 2 years is enough. Okay, if you change it, but still, like if you commit in game, it's good that whenever you join, you reach the end of the game. However, on the other spectrum of the question, I'm very skeptical when I see a person that worked 10 years in a company. Okay, because it's like I always get I get a bit of a weird feeling, because it's like why did they work so much in this company? What was the reason? Like, and also if I see a person that they did the uni or whatever studies, you don't need uni to do animation, but they did their studies and then they join a company and that was their only working place for 10 years and then they go out of there. I don't know. I will have to examine this person more, maybe ask for more tests, maybe because I have a feeling that they didn't see the world enough. I don't know how to explain it.
It's a fair point. I think there are a lot of people that I know that just stepped outside this uni and went straight into
the company, and then they start there, they do junior, they do standard, they do all the positions, but then they never really interacted with outside that small environment.
I see your point. I think like it's quite a wide, it's quite a big topic, because like there are people that I believe that I met that are like this and they're really good. And although they don't know the outside and they're really scared of going outside, and then there are other people that maybe sit on their desk there. Like, I think they kind of park themselves in the company.
Yeah, and also when you stay long in a company, even if you don't think about it, but it's kind of easy to go in a cruise mode in a way. And changing company is gonna give you again that bit of a kick. You have to prove yourself again. You have to put yourself in play again in a way. So I think there are many positives on that side. Obviously, you don't need to change company just to not cruise. You can also obviously be proactive, think of how to challenge yourself with wherever you are and how to improve what you're doing, right? But this cruise part is not doesn't mean that you go to work and you do half of your job, right? But means that you have a certain sense of security, which in my opinion it should never be taken for granted. Because this in Italian we say il pepe al culo.
Fire under your ass,
which is
kind of fire under your ass. Pepe would be pepper, right? So because in Italy you put the pepper under your ass and then you're like a bit itchy and you're like,
you can't sit for too long.
You can't sit for too long, so you have to keep yourself.
I think it's worth remembering, everybody here, that none of us has kids. So there are people who are in the industry for many years, and at a certain point, I think when they build a family, they just, simply speaking, find it difficult to stay on top of, or even, I think it reframes their focus. I'm pretty sure that it would do it for me as well. So I think there are many cases, but I understand that one of the risks of being in the same company for 20 years is that the moment you leave, you have no guarantee that other companies will work the same way, for instance, and that's probably the biggest.
They will not. They will
not. Yeah.
I think one of the main. Sorry.
That's the biggest obstacle. Then every other consideration to me is secondary. But at the same time, if somebody is happy and they do a good job and they stay 25 years in a place, I don't think there's a big issue. That's my opinion.
I think it depends on the company. So like I think like one of the warning is like, is the company really has a really strong pipeline or not, or like has like the company really automatized like a lot of the tools, because then that's where I see people forgetting how to do the basics.
Right.
And that's the problem when you go outside. So and also like if you keep staying in the same position for several years, that's where you get stuck and you don't learn anymore. I think if you keep changing and you keep doing things from scratch a little bit, I think it helps a lot. But I did see a lot of people coming from outside that were used to working like in big companies and always like keep jumping around. So they didn't stay in the same company, but because they were used to working in big companies with really strong pipeline, they were really panicking when they got to a situation where there wasn't.
Hey, well, it's hard for them, because if you come from a company where we one click, and I've been in a similar place, you work in 1 year in a company where the pipeline is really supporting your work, and then you move to a place where there's no pipeline. And I remember being told, well, now you do the shot, and I had to do everything. And I was thinking, whoa, how dare you? Where's my button to prepare the scene? And you really get used psychologically. You don't even realize it, but you get very pampered by a good pipeline, which is a great thing to have. And you wouldn't be able to do great projects without a pipeline, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's one of the downsides of automation and technological advancement. And I want to go back to what Max said the last time, that working on the worst movie on Netflix at the time was really helpful to us, because you have to work in a boat that leaks water all over the place. So you can't just be the one who mops mops the floor. You have to go around and do a bit of everything, and that really gives you awareness. So the next time you're on a boat, you're not just enjoying the ride. You are actually checking what goes on around you. It gives you a different sense of awareness. And I'm afraid that we are running out of time, and also that we are a bit derailing, because I wanted also to I want to talk a bit more about the logistics, but I think we covered most of the topics.
The person talking about the animation in India. I just want
yes. So thank you, Francesca. So the Polly Bevel asked, what do you think about the industry in India? Well, I don't know what to think, because I've never been. I mean, I've been to India. I think we had a conversation about it on one of my Twitch. But I don't know how they work there. I think, to be honest, that a lot of the work is moving towards India and some other country nearby, I imagine. And I think there's a good opportunity there to do work. And now that the pipeline is essentially global with some limits, I think that if you are a student in India and you want to work in animation, there's going to be a lot of work there for sure. And the market is quite big there. And Polly Bevel was also asking, but I don't know much about it in person. Polly Bevel was also asking some advice or tips if he wanted to apply to companies, but I think we have to do it in another call, because that's a call in itself.
Yeah,
so how do you apply? I mean, it is a call in itself. So I've taken note of the topic, and I will probably include it in another call. And I think we covered most of the ground anyway. Francesca and Daniele, do you think? I think there is a note to be made about being a freelancer. I think. So. Do you want to be a freelancer in a country which is not yours? And I think the question is, if you're happy being a freelancer, you should definitely consider the idea, because there are countries where this thing is pretty easy to make, and most countries, they make it relatively easy, in my opinion. They don't put too many limits. What do you think, Francesca?
Don't do it in Italy.
Yes.
But in UK, it was actually the easiest and most satisfying things I ever done, because I think doing the tax return was extremely easy. It took me probably an hour. It was really simple and easy to understand, even for someone that's foreigner. And it was really satisfying, because it was my first job in London, and I was really well paid, and I didn't believe, I did ask for that money, because I checked around what I could ask, and I couldn't believe I was earning that much, and someone was giving me that much of money. So I was really happy, and I think it was I think it was one of the reasons why I stepped out of it is because when you do freelancing job, you might be doing jobs in small studio, which are a great way to start and makes you really independent, because you have to do a bit of everything and work it out yourself. So it makes you really good in terms of and reliable. But then I wanted to be surrounded by people with more experience than me, because I was still a junior back in the time in the moment. So that's why I went to into working with a fixed contract. But it was a really great experience, and I think I totally recommend it. I think it's just generally the fact you need to do a bit of everything. You need to be more reliable. You need to be independent, and you earn a good money. It's actually really well paid. I think one of the things that people get stressed about are the gaps between a job and another. So you have to calculate, I think, this also in the rate you ask for. So I think you are so well paid, because as soon as you finish a job, you might not have another job straight away. But I think at the times where I was doing freelancing, even those gaps were totally fine for me, affordable, because I earned enough before. So I think it's actually something. Now I will reconsider it again. I think it's something that I will do again. If you don't have children, I think it's easier. And I think if you don't have you don't have to pay a huge mortgage or a huge rent, and if you don't get stressed, then go for it. If you tend to be stressed and you're more comfortable with a longer contract, then that's not maybe for you.
Yeah, and don't get stressed about taxes. In general, taxes, they always look a bit overwhelming, but it's when you go and check, they're actually doable. I mean, I used to do my own tax return in Italy, and I can assure you it's not easy. But and I still managed to do it, and I received only a few fines from the government for doing that. So it's
only few is a mega success. Yeah.
My accountant, and I still have no clue of what kind of taxes I was paying in Italy. I just feel like too much.
Yeah, so it can look overwhelming because you're in a different country, and now you also have to do the tax return in a different language. But usually countries, they try to make it, apart from Italy, they try to make it easier on you. So I don't know, I don't remember how it was in Germany. I think in Germany I had to ask a colleague to do some translations for me because the documents were in German at the time and I couldn't understand them.
Well, still now, isn't it?
They're still in German, yeah.
In English. No.
Did you have
obviously no, because I was I had a normal contract.
You're employed
with the company, so I never had to take care of this. Thank God.
But yeah, it's don't listen to Daniele. It's not so complicated.
It's not so bad. It's not so bad.
As long as you have Google Translate to help you with it.
Yeah, and I mean the way you do tax return online in the UK is almost silly. It's that simple that you wouldn't believe it. It's really, really simple. And I think at this stage, guys, I will call it a night.
Yeah, let's end up with a high note talking about taxes.
Yes,
let's talk. And actually, as a high note talking about taxes, I remember, like, as a last story, I remember that in the UK, I was doing my taxes. And in the UK, the first time you set up your taxes, the government needs to do some adjustments. It's not entirely automatic. And you may end up overpaying taxes. And I remember one day I went back home and there was an envelope from Revenue and Customs, from the tax agency. And I was used to Italy. Whenever you had an envelope from the tax agency, I remember that they wanted money from me. And so I was shaking. I was like, oh no, even in this nation, I'm going to pay taxes. And the envelope contained a check because I overpaid taxes and I got my money back. And I remember being in the same situation in Italy where I received an envelope from the tax agency saying, we owe you, I think it was about 800 euros. You owe us about 200 euros. And I was thinking, well, the math is easy. Give me 600. And I went and I had to go physically to the tax agency and say, look, this is the letter. Give me 600. And they said, it's not that easy, Mr. Beretta. First, you have to prove that we owe you that money, although we say we do. And we will do all the math. And what happens if from the math it emerges that we don't owe you that money, but it's the opposite? And I was, oh, I get it, right? And he said, yeah, it's probably going to cost you more in photocopies, they said. I was like, okay. And that was one of my last experiences with the tax agency in Italy. Not the very last, but one of the last. It was really a relief when I didn't have to deal with that anymore. And there is a question saying, has it become more difficult to live in the UK after Brexit? I will close very quickly. I don't think so, because now you can work remotely. Francesca, what do you think?
It hasn't been a problem hiring people from Europe. It does, but because the Brexit happened with the lockdown, that means a lot of people working remotely from their own country. So I can't say for a fact that nothing changed, because a lot of people are actually still working remotely. But when they would come here, I think the government is quite flexible on people working, especially in the film industry, and about the salary, because there is a salary threshold for people coming from outside UK, and if you don't hit that, which means a lot of junior, then in theory you can't work in UK without a visa. But I think it's pretty flexible. Again, I think we will need to wait until the lockdown is finished completely and the pandemic is gone, and then we will be able to tell. I think it's still pretty easy to come here. To stay for a long time, that's something we will probably see later on.
Yeah. So I will close on this note. You have seen me, Amedeo Beretta, Daniele Duri, and Francesca Pesce. And we try to make this call every Thursday. Sometimes there will be different people, I suppose. And so if you're interested, we will talk again next Thursday at the same hour, which is 6 p.m. BST, British Standard, British Summertime. Summertime, because because GMT is not in use at this time of the year.
Cool
so
enough.
it's not cool enough, yes. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was a lot of fun, even more than I expected. And we'll see you again maybe next Thursday if you want. Bye. Have a good night.
Bye bye.